everyone. Welcome to Hangout number 2. Today we have next to Jim Rogers a very interesting guest, reporter and writer Betty Lou. My name is Lucas. I'm founder of JimRogersWorld.com, and in today's Hangout I would like to welcome first, and I'm sure Jim doesn't mind, Betty Lou. Those who often watch Bloomberg television, like I do, will recognize her right away. Betty is hosting the daily morning show In the Loop. Welcome, Betty. Sunday morning in New York. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Lucas. Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
I'm terrific. I can hardly wait so we can get started, and then I can go to the disco.
It's a little too early for the disco for me here, but I know what you mean.
I know. Well, I will drink a martini just for you.
Well, Lucas, it's great to, thanks so much for inviting me on this Google Hangout. This is actually my number 1. I've never done this before, so this is pretty cool to be doing this, live. And Jim, I've read your book, Street Smarts, and in homage to you, I named my book Work Smarts, so we have yet another thing in common there.
So Betty, when will your book be out?
It's actually out already. In fact, hang on one second. I'm gonna have to get you to. I'll have to sign a book and send it to you. So there you go.
Well, I will go and buy it. No, you don't send me one. I will go and buy it.
Thanks so much for inviting me on this. All right, Jim. One of the things that one of the topics of this book is I went to various CEOs, business leaders, and I asked them, how did they? I read your book, Street Smart. How do they, how do they make sure that they are always trying to do the right thing, to be able to get to, get to the top? Like, what were the biggest lessons they learned getting to the top? And I've always been curious about you. Throughout your life, you've done so many different things. You've traveled around the world. And you brought all that into your investments. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned on the road that's helped you be a great investor?
Well, I don't know if I'm a great investor, but it's some of the lessons I have learned in life is focus, 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 persevere, don't give up, when you have a setback, stay with it, try again, if you will, but you really need to focus your efforts. I mean, whenever I jump around too much, I usually have a problem, and I notice many other people do too. So my advice is stay with what you know, focus, and persevere. Just work harder than everybody else.
Did you know that you were always going to be just a little bit different? Did you know that you always looked at things a little bit differently than others?
Well, looking back on my life, yes. I grew up in a very small town, Betty, a very small town, and yeah, I knew I didn't think like the other people in that town. I did okay. I succeeded in that town. But then when I went off to university, I also started saying, well, I think a little differently from the other people, but nothing radical. When I got to Wall Street is when I really noticed that I think differently from other people, because most of the things that I would invest in, other people would laugh at. I now know that that's a good sign. You want people to laugh at you. You want people to ridicule you, your ideas. But at first, I didn't understand that.
Well, how did you overcome that? Because most people would say if they got laughed at, or if they were, if a lot of people criticized them or made fun of their, their viewpoints or their convictions, that would be a deterrent for some people. So how did you know, or where did that come from? Where you said, you know what, everybody might be going right, but I'm going left.
Well, part of it was I didn't talk to most people most of the time. I stayed away. I just did my own thing. I locked myself in my office and did my own thing. And then the few times that I was exposed to other people, they always thought it was weird or crazy. But, Betty, the best way to overcome it was people would laugh, I would redo my efforts, and then I would be right. That's the best way to overcome the insecurity. If you keep doing it and people keep laughing and you keep doing it and you're right, then eventually you build up a little self-confidence. And that happened to me. I eventually realized that maybe I was doing something right.
Where did your wanderlust come from? This desire to travel the world.
Well, that's an extremely good. I think it's partly that I grew up in this very small town in the backwoods of Alabama, and I knew that I somehow knew that there was a lot of world out there, And from when I was a teenager, I used to tell people that I wanted to see the world. I had a girlfriend, and I told her I hadn't seen much of the world. I was already 16. And she said, "Oh, I've seen a lot of the world. I've been to Birmingham. I've been to Mobile. I've been to Montgomery." I said, "No, that's not quite what I had in mind." So I was always
very... a passport, right?
Yeah, right. No, I always, for some reason, always wanted to see the world. It's been a very strong motivation with me.
Most people who are, the people who are watching this and the people who have read your books, they want to know your investing secrets, right? They want to know how you become a successful investor. What do you think are, let's say, the top 3 biggest mistakes other people make when they're investing that you've seen through the years?
Well, the secret to my success, Betty, is I watch In the Loop. That's my.
Hey, I happen to have it right here.
There she is. Yes. No, I mean the main mistake. I don't know about the main mistake because I don't. But following each other is a very dangerous thing. Getting a hot tip and then acting on it and doing what other people are doing. That's, for me anyway, that's nearly always a mistake. Nearly every time in my life that I've done something because Joe said so or Mary said so, it's cost me money. I still make the mistake, but I try to discipline myself more and more and more to just stay with what I know myself. I can lose plenty of money myself. I don't need to listen to other people to give me tips to lose money.
So does that mean that this last year's rally, let's say, or really the rally that we have seen since the bottom of the recession in the equity markets, is another example of everybody following the herd? And does that worry you?
Well, of course it worries, but the herd is based on some reality, and the reality is that all the central banks in the world, for the first time in recorded history, are all printing huge amounts of money. This has never happened. You have Japan, Europe, America, the UK, all printing lots of money, trying to, there's an artificial ocean of liquidity rising out. Look out the window and you'll see the ocean going higher and higher and higher. Everybody's following the crowd, but it's based on some reality. It's artificial reality, but it's happening. And it worries. Yes, of course it worries me.
Well, and yet you heard Ben Bernanke this week, though. He was speaking to the Brookings Institution this week, where he said, "I think it's been proven out that quantitative easing over the last several years, given the low inflation, has worked." He said, "Look, the evidence is there."
Well, maybe in his mind it's there, but in his mind there was no housing problem 6 years ago. In his mind there was no subprime problem 6 years ago. What's worked, Betty? Unemployment is higher today than it was in 2008. Everything is worse than it was in 2008. He says it's better because the stock market is better, but that's not reality. And he says there's no inflation, but he uses government numbers. If you shop, you know that there's a problem. India says there's a problem. China, Norway, Taiwan, Australia. How can there be inflation in all these countries in the world except in the United States and except in Washington, D.C.?
So would you say inflation, given all this artificial money you're talking about, would you say inflation is the big unknown risk, sort of the wild card to come?
Well, it's going to come, but the unknown, the wild card for me anyway, is what's going to happen when the central banks cut back. Now, America's central bank says it's going to cut back, continue to cut back. I suspect they will. Until, Betty, what will happen is markets around the world will start going down. They will start getting scared. And after they're down 15 or 20%, the bureaucrats, the central bankers are going to get scared, and they're going to start printing money again. Eventually, this is going to lead to inflation that everybody knows about, but they'll start printing money again. Markets will rally. They'll say there's a sigh of relief, and this will continue. As I say, it's reality, but it's artificial, and so it worries me. But I don't like to say it, but I'm playing the game too.
So tell me the game you're playing these days then, Jim. How are you playing this?
Well, Japan is, the United States stock market's all-time highs. The Japanese stock market is down 60 or 70% from its all-time high. And Mr. Abe in Japan has no constraints. He can spend as much as he wants. He can print as much as he wants. So I am playing it more in Japan than in the U.S., where the central bank says it's going to cut back. I am playing it in Russia, for instance, where certainly a very depressed stock market. Everybody hates Russia. I think it's hated more than any place except maybe Argentina in the world. I'm starting to buy some Chinese shares. I'm still worried about the Chinese stock market, but you know, the plenum last month in November in Beijing, they say it's one of the 3 most important things that's happened in the last 35 years in China. Well, I believe them.
And you agree?
We'll find out. I'm following. They say the Chinese government, we're going to invest in these areas. I've learned, Betty, that if the Chinese government puts a lot of money into something, I should too, because the stock market may be bad, but those sectors of the Chinese economy will do better than others and or suffer less. So there are ways to play. By the way, in Japan too, Mr. Abe, starting January 1st, has given the Japanese the option of tax-free investing in the stock market. Now, I've been around a long time, and every time I've seen a government give tax-free incentives for people to invest in the stock market, people do. People are not foolish, and it's always made the stock market go up. So I see reasons that Japan could continue to be an interesting place to invest. I own airlines. Go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead. So you own airlines in Japan. What else?
Well, no, I don't own airlines in Japan. I own airlines in other parts of the world. No, I was just going to say I bought SAS recently, which is a disaster in Scandinavia. I bought unless you think I know what I'm doing, I bought a Thailand airline in the fall. And as you know, Betty, there's now blood in the streets in Thailand. There's civil unrest and riots and everything else. So needless to say, my Thai airline has gone down. So I'm not, as usual, I'm not very good with timing.
I was going to say, you're not really a market timer, though. I mean, you don't.
You know, I've told you a million times, I'm the worst market timer in the world.
I know.
Absolutely hopeless at trading. Hopeless.
Just a quick question in between, Betty. There's just someone is asking a question to you both. Do you think that with the speed of communication and faster technology, all the new techniques, everything has quickened, that the speed of change and emergency of new markets is there, and that you think the eras will be shorter?
Well, we know that things have quickened. 100 years ago, there wasn't a telephone. Now there's a telephone. Now there's the internet. Now there's, Bloomberg TV, Bloomberg terminals, etc. We can all get information very quickly. But Lucas, that's not the point. The point is judgment. 100 people can be in a room and all hear the same information at exactly the same time. Most of them will not get it right, will not make the right judgment. Speed has changed, certainly over the past 200 years, 100 years. But most people still make the same mistakes that they made 100 years ago, including me. I just told you, I make plenty of mistakes.
Jim, I'm kind of curious, just talking about your own personal life, and how long you've been in Singapore. You moved to Singapore with your wife and kids because you believe strongly that Asia is going to be the dominant force in the global economy. In the time that you've been there what, over what, 10, 15 years?
No, 7 years.
7 years. Oh, it seems longer than that. But
I miss you too, Betty.
The time that you've been there, Jim, what's been the biggest change you've seen living in Singapore?
Well, the biggest change during that period of time, there was a financial collapse around the world. But it has shown me that Asia is even stronger than before, because the largest creditor nations in the world are China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore. The money's here, and it's just more and more evident that Asia's on the rise and that many parts of the West are on decline, or at least relative decline. It's been remarkable to see the difference. If I fly to JFK or if I fly to Hong Kong, it's a huge difference.
And yet you're seeing the cost of that growth, though. I mean, just the other day there was a picture that was on that became sort of a slight viral sensation, where they showed they showed how people in Beijing rather than actually seeing an actual sunrise, they had to have a big television set propped up to show you what a sunrise actually looks like. And pictures like that tell you, like, look at the huge cost of that growth, and isn't that going to be a huge issue?
Well, it already is. That's why I don't live in China, because I mean, there's some very exciting cities in China, but they're all filthy. China is a very filthy, dirty country right now. But I'm not the only. The Chinese know it, and they're now spending billions of dollars to clean up China, the water, the air, and everything else. Yeah, I don't want to live there, but somebody's going to make a lot of money, Betty, cleaning it up. Figure out who's going to. One of the things that came out of the Beijing Plenum was we're going to clean up China. And somebody's going to do it, and somebody's going to make a fortune.
So how are you investing in China then? Are you investing in that part of the story?
Yes, I've started. Now, again, I'm a little worried about the Chinese stock market, but I have started investing in the things that they're investing in. They say that they're going to clean up China. Well, fine, I'm gonna do my bit. They say that. One interesting thing they said, Betty, was that when there's a complicated situation, we're going to let the market decide how to solve the problem. And they use medical care as one of the examples, because they got a big they need more medical care. So they say we're going to have a free market in medicine. That's in sharp contrast to America and the West, where in America, for instance, we say the government can decide and will decide. The government is smarter than everybody else. In China, they said the market.
About? In what area in the U.S.? What are you talking about?
There's something called Obamacare, which became the law of the land January 1st of this year. And the government says, don't worry, folks, we will solve all the medical problems in the United States. China said, we're going to let the market decide. So if you're interested in medicine, or if you're a doctor or something, you might think about going to China, because it's wide open. They're spending a lot of money to try to help medical care. But that's an example.
Right, but I mean, that would be one example in the United States. I mean, that is probably the most prominent example right now, because it has had so many mistakes and stumbles and failures along the way. But at the same time, on the flip side, people say that in the United States, despite the drag it might have on the economy and on the system, that we need universal health care in America.
Well, that's a different issue which we can discuss. But in America, we spend 17% of our GDP on health care, and we sure don't get. And that's 3 or 4 times as much as even number 2 or number 3. And we certainly don't have the results. Our life expectancy is not even in the top 20. Our life expectancy for children is abysmal. No, we're not. Whatever we're spending and whatever the government is directing, we're not getting the results that other people are.
Jim, Lucas, you have something?
No, continue. I'll have some questions later, because I'm looking at what's happening outside of this interview, and there's lots of questions coming in, and more people, joining us. So I will figure it out and come back to you.
Okay, all right. I'll talk to Jim in a few minutes more, and then we can start getting some questions in, because I'm sure a lot of people have questions for Jim. Jim, throughout the years, you and I have talked about Washington, and you've never had a nice word to say about practically anyone in D.C. But at some point, the dust has settled. The economy, yes, is still on fragile footing, but it is recovering. Is there anybody in Washington that you at least can say some good words about? Is there anybody that you at least think has gotten it somewhat right?
Well, yes. I mean, Ron Paul, understood more or less.
No, not Ron Paul. Come on.
He's not there anymore, but his son, Rand Paul, certainly gets it right and understands it. But not many left in it. I'm just trying to think, Betty. I cannot think of anybody. I mean, Jim Bunning was a senator, and he was down there. He understood the things that had to be done, but very few of them do. We wouldn't be in this mess. Betty, we are the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. You think that's good? And our debts are going through the roof every week, every month, every year. Somebody's doing something wrong. At least as far as I'm concerned, when the country goes from being a creditor nation 30 years ago to being the largest debtor nation in the history of the world, somebody's doing something wrong, in my view.
Would you ever consider moving back to the United States, Jim?
I would consider anything, yes. I never thought I'd leave. If you told me 20 years ago, I wouldn't have known what you were talking about. Sure, of course I would live. I'm an American citizen. I'm an American taxpayer. I'm an American voter. Sure, why not? But at the moment, what's most important for me is my children's education, and the education is better in Europe, in Asia, I think you know, and I want them to learn to continue to speak Mandarin, and it's working. They speak great Mandarin.
What would you like for your kids? What would make you, obviously you want your kids to do whatever they're passionate about and whatever they would like to do, but because you move them out to Asia, because you have them learn Mandarin, because you have, had this huge conviction that Asia is the place to be, what would you want your kids to do in an ideal world?
Well, you said it before. I want them to figure out their passion and pursue it. Now, most people don't figure out their passion in their lives, and some that do don't pursue it because they're told to be lawyers or doctors or, journalists or whatever it is. I want both of my girls to figure out what they love and pursue it no matter what, because if nothing else, Betty, then they'll be happy, and they're more likely to be successful if they pursue their passions, because the people who are doing what they love never go to work. They wake up every morning and start having fun. And they don't have a job. They don't do anything. They don't work. They just have fun. So that's what I'm hoping for my girls. And I'm trying to tell them that all the time. I'm also trying to teach them, be skeptical, be curious, think independently, beware of the boys. I'm trying to teach them some of life's lessons.
Did you always know, before I turn it over to other questions, did you always know that you loved investing, that you wanted to be an investor?
I had no clue when I was a senior at university I was going to go to law school and medical school, business school. I didn't have a clue what I wanted in life. I was floundering around like many other seniors at university. But then I stumbled onto Wall Street, and I couldn't believe it. I loved it so much. They were going to pay me. They were going to pay me to do what I loved, pay me to know about the world and figure out what was going to happen in the world, and they'd pay me a lot of money if I did it well. I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. I didn't go to law school. I didn't go to medical school. I didn't go to business school. I got there as soon as I could. I hope my girls figure out, even if it's by accident, find out what they love and will pursue it. Even, Betty, if they want to be a presenter at Bloomberg TV.
I was going to say, what about even if they went into politics, Jim? All right.
Well, if they can be true to themselves, yes. The problem with politics in the world is very few of them can be true to themselves. If you're true to yourself, you probably won't get elected. Not in anywhere in the world, not just America. It's one of the problems of politics. One of the problems of democracy.
It is indeed. Lucas, do you have some questions from people who are watching the Hangout?
Yes, we have, but one question first, maybe, because there's some students watching here, and you were a professor yourself during a period of time, Jim. What were you teaching? What were you teaching those children or those students?
Trying to teach them to be curious and not accept the conventional wisdom. I was trying to teach them how to be investors and make sure they had to make their own decisions and their own come to their own conclusions, not to rely on other people. And I sat there. I tried to teach it like the Socratic dialogue, just asking questions to make them come to their own firm foundation, firm decisions, but always question them. But I always told them, what happened to Socrates for asking questions all the time? They executed him, so who knows? Why don't you talk for a minute? I'm going to go get some water. I'll be right back.
Okay, just take some water. Well, in the beginning of this Hangout, something went wrong because I was hearing everything double. That's why Betty was very happy that you jumped in, in the beginning.
I know. That's right. I was hearing myself, so...
I'm back.
Yeah, I was hearing myself as well. So, I never really came to introduce you properly and tell you that you just wrote your book Work Smarts, and where you basically have lots of insights and the wisdom of lots of CEOs of successful companies in the US. And the funny thing is that Jim wrote his book Street Smarts. So you both have smarts in the titles of your book.
I know, and yeah. I actually, you know what? I mean, and this is the absolute truth. I didn't actually realize that Jim and I both had kind of like very similar titles until like yesterday when I started like really studying up, and I was like, oh my God, we have like we could have basically put out a twofer edition or something like that.
Well, Betty, who's your publisher? Because I want to get one tomorrow morning.
Yes, I'm going to send you one. It's Wiley. Here, I'm going to do another promotional plug here. But yeah.
Betty, do not send me one. Authors don't get rich giving away books. No. I will buy one, okay? Do not
all right. Well, you've been a friend for so many years, Jim.
I understand. You want to send me a book, send me Moby Dick or something. No, I will buy Work Smart.
All right. Well, deal. That's a deal. But yeah, Wiley's the publisher. It's on Amazon right now, and so it's.
Okay, I didn't know about it because I'm sitting here in in Asia. So, but now I know, and I'll do something about it.
Excellent.
Well, we got a question from Paul from the Netherlands. He's asking to Jim, what indicators of economic figures do you look at to tell if the current stock market bubble is coming to an end? So he wants to know what indicators you look at.
Well, Paul, by the way, I'm going to be speaking in Amsterdam on Wednesday, so maybe I'll meet you. There's no simple answer to that, Paul. I try to look at a lot of that. I try to look at sentiment to see if people are getting enthusiastic or despondent. I look at money printing to see what's happening with the amount of money flowing into the economy. Bubbles pretty much look the same all over the world when everybody is, flocking to the stock market, when everybody's talking about stocks, etc., when stocks are selling at high prices, when you have some stocks going up a lot every day. Those are usually signs those are signs of a bubble. You can look at things like the dividend yield, which if it's low, that's a warning sign. If the price-earnings ratio is very high, that's a warning sign. There are various and sundry warning signs. But I want to tell you, Paul, if I were any good in market timing, I'd be rich. I'm just not any good at it.
Another question from Sam. He's a student in Canada, and he's saying, in your view about agriculture, is if your view about agriculture is true today, as it was in the late 90s when you created the Jim Rogers Agricultural Index, the RICI. Why is it then that we have not witnessed yet the expected boom that we anticipated due to the horrible demographics and age of farmers yet?
Well, it's a very good question. In fact, agriculture has been the worst performing of metals and energy in commodities. Agriculture has been the worst. The Rogers Agricultural Index is down, believe it or not, 18% in the last 15 years. So agricultural prices have not done well at all. Now, many farmers in many parts of the world are starting to make a lot of money for a variety of reasons because there's big demand for their products. But in my view, Betty and I were talking before about what I'm investing in. I mean, I've told Betty before that she should become a farmer. And I'll tell you, Paul, we should all become farmers. But look at Betty. Don't you see she could look great on a tractor? It's going to happen, Paul. Inventories of food are the lowest near historic lows. We keep consuming more than we're producing. Worse than that, the average age of farmers in America is 58. In Canada, where you live, it's the oldest in recorded history. Australia is 58. Japan, it's 66. I mean, we're running out of farmers. More people in America study public relations than study agriculture. So something has got to change dramatically, or we're not to attract capital and management and labor into agriculture, or we're not going to have any food at any price.
Well, also we have got here Eric from Hong Kong, and he said that you recently said that silver may do better than gold Why is that? Are you still, is this still your opinion?
Yes, I'm not buying either one right now. I'm not buying either gold or silver, but when I do, I would expect silver's down 60% from its all-time high. Gold is down 30% from its all-time high. I mean, there's no magic to it. I just see that one is cheaper than the other at the moment. So I'm not buying either at the moment, though. But if I had to buy something today, I would buy silver.
Thank you. I think there's two more questions here which are quite interesting. One is very simple. How do you cope with losses?
That's a good question.
That's an extremely good question. I wish I had an answer. Usually I deny reality. I'm not, the market's wrong. Well, I'm telling you, I can say that all day long, that the market's wrong. Then I re-examine my position. I re-examine, eventually the pain gets so bad that I just cut my losses, like all other amateurs, and I suffer and lose money. Many people I know, smart people I know, use stop losses. If an investment that they have goes down 10% or 12%, whatever the number is, they automatically go out. I have never done that, rarely done that. I should probably reconsider that, because sometimes my losses just keep going because I'm so bullheaded, and it's not a good trait.
And a question from Ingrid. She says that she's fairly new at investing, and I guess there's lots of people with a limited starting capital, and she's interested in getting early in the emerging markets but she has limited amounts of money. And what can you advise her? What can you advise? What can you offer her?
Does it say where she's from, Lucas?
Well, it says Ingrid sells, so it's like an ad. It's a Twitter address. So I don't know.
Oh, okay. No. Well, what she should do is, first of all, save her money. If you're new to this, Ingrid, the more you learn, I mean, this is not easy, this investing business. It's not at all easy. You need to spend a lot of time learning about it, and in the meantime, you can save more money so that you do have more capital to invest. And after you really, really, really know a lot about something, then start making investments. But don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody, even if you see them on Bloomberg TV. Don't listen until you make your own decisions. And Ingrid, you should start with what you know a lot about. I don't know what you know, but maybe you know fashion, maybe you know sports or cars. Who knows what you know? Whatever you know, start there. Maybe you know some countries better than others. Start there, save your money, do a lot of homework, and then you can start investing.
But Jim, hearing you say the comments you did earlier about, that central banks are piling in money into the markets, it's artificial money, and, the amount of criticism that you've had on how policymakers are essentially, in your view, essentially they're manipulating the economy. It can be scary for an initial investor. It can be scary for any average individual investor. And so, how do you, so I guess, there's on the one hand, sort of, government officials are not handling the economy right. And on the other hand, we're encouraging investors to be in the markets. Can you do two at the same time? Can you hold two views at the same time?
Well, they should be scared. I'm trying to urge them to be scared, because I'm scared of what's happening with Washington. But Betty, I'm always scared when I invest, because there's always something that could go wrong. What I was trying to encourage Ingrid to do was to know what she was doing. Nothing wrong with investing. People can make money at it, but they should not be investing unless they're really on top of things and know what's going on. Even in down markets, people can make money if they know what they're doing. So all I'm saying to Ingrid is there's lots of dangerous things happening in the world at the moment. There are also positive things for the market. All this money printing is going into markets, so that's great for markets. If you're a Japanese stockbroker right now, you think you've died and gone to heaven. You can't believe how good things are.
Or you might think you're the smartest guy out there.
That's it. That's it. And that's what we all do when we're all making a lot of money, on the long side or the short side. We all think, oh, boy, this is easy.
Right.
That's really a very dangerous time. That's when we should close the windows, turn off the TV, and just do nothing for a while. That's the dangerous time.
Jim, one last question. You know, it jumps off of the question before about your losses, or you know, how do you handle losses? One of the things I asked all the CEOs in this book, in the book Work Smarts, was what did they learn from their biggest mistake? So what have you learned? What would you count as one of your biggest mistakes, and what did you learn from it?
My first wife. What a mistake that was. What a terrible, foolish thing that was for me to do. God, I ran into her the other day. I couldn't believe I had ever talked to her, much less married her. So just what I'm telling my girls, be very careful of the boys. That's what I'm telling them. Be very careful. Don't rush off and get married until you're plenty older. You know what you're doing. You know yourself, because it can be very, very difficult. A big, big mistake. And that's hard to cut your losses. When it's a stock or an investment, you can cut your losses. When you're married, oh my God, it's a real mistake.
That's harder to get out of than selling your shares. That's for sure.
Yeah, you cannot take a stop loss. There is no stop loss in a marriage.
Well, maybe let's not finish with this question. You know, maybe we want to remember the hangout by another last question. There's someone called Maureen, and she's asking specifically on Japan, because you've spoken now a lot about Japan, and she's saying if the Japanese pension plans are buying equities, you think they are also going to sell? Are they going to sell bonds against that?
Well, if I were Japanese anything, I would be selling bonds against it. But the Japanese central bank has more money than I do, and they keep buying bonds. Eventually bonds have to go down. Bonds have been at an extraordinarily low interest rate for 15 years, maybe more. No, to almost 20 years now. So eventually the market's not going to put up with it. But in the meantime, even if Japanese pension funds sell bonds, the bank keeps buying them. They keep printing money. They're buying them with printed money. That's why the currency keeps going down. But eventually, nobody's going to buy Japanese bonds. Eventually, Japan's going to be in a terrible, terrible shape. What Prime Minister Abe is doing is a terrible mistake, if you ask me. 20 years from now, we'll look back and say, well, Mr. Abe is the one who ruined Japan finally. But in the meantime, as I said, Japanese stockbrokers are having a wonderful, wonderful time.
Well, and they're increasing the VAT, you know, as well. So this is not going to be very. They're increasing all kinds of taxes.
I know they are, but they're also giving incentives, such as you can now have tax-free incentives as of January 1st to buy shares in Japan. They're doing a lot of things to encourage finance and the stock market and brokers. Brokers in Japan have had a long, by the way, I own Japanese stockbrokers. That's one of the things I bought. Brokers in Japan have had a terrible time but the bear market in Japan has been going on for 24 years, and it's down 70%. Brokers have not had a good time in Japan for a long, long time, but now they're in heaven.
Thank you, Jim, for spending the time with us. Betty, any last comments, or are you okay to wrap it off and close down? Because I think it's like 11 o'clock in Singapore time in the evening. You have the whole day in front of you. I'm on half of the day. It's 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock here in Austria.
This is a truly global international hangout. This is cool.
Yeah.
It certainly is. It certainly is. But Betty, you've already missed. Sunday's almost over here. You missed a very good Sunday. But Lucas, if I could, can we have the people live when they ask questions in the future?
Yes. Next time, what we do, we could have like up to 9-10 people live in the call and ask them questions. They'll be able to talk to you directly. And what I want to do is, you know, have some more students as groups participating in the call. And they're very keen on doing that and learning from you.
I don't know if they're going to learn from me, but they've certainly learned if they read Betty's new book. But I like to see the people when I'm talking to them. That's one of the reasons I thought this might be a good idea, because we can see each other while we're talking to each other.
Yes. Well, next call we will have 9 to 10 people in the call, because otherwise you will not be able to. You're not able to speak, like say, to 100 people at the same time. So you have to take some questions from via Twitter or the question feed, which is running next to our screen. But there's definitely a possibility of having much more lively discussion with groups of people. But as this is the second one, and I thought with Betty Lou it was a rare occasion of getting her to interview in this second Hangout. But next time, I would definitely would like to have more people in.
Well, if you could only have 9 or 10 at a time, what you could do is have 9 on and then drop them out as somebody asks a question. You know, as Sally or Bill ask a question, then drop them off and bring others on live. Because the fun part for me is interacting with the questioner, the audience.
Yes, I think so as well. That's the good part of doing such a thing.
Don't get me wrong, Betty is wonderful fun, but I want to interact with a lot of people.
And a lot of people want to interact with you.
And that's something that's true, and that's what we're going to do.
Okay, very good. Okay,
Great.
I'm off to the disco.
Yes, you are.
Well, Betty, what are you doing?
I'm off to go get some breakfast.
Okay, well, have a good breakfast, have a nice disco time, and speak to you next time.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
bye-bye.
Betty. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.